Welcome everybody to the afternoon session of the Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting for September 29th, 2020. We are on item 11A for our afternoon, which is a discussion of the matter presenting the fourth quarter fiscal year 1920 financial report. And with us is Christine Moody, our budget and financial planning manager.
Thank you, Chair Buck, Commissioners. And I'm having some technology difficulties in my home office today, so I don't have a camera, so I apologize for that. But hopefully you all have the quarterly report in front of you for reference, but I thought I would just highlight a few things for you and then open it up for discussion. So this is an initial fourth quarter report is what I would call it, because our external financial audit is still in progress. But we just didn't want to wait too long to come to you with some numbers comparing our actuals to budget. So the actual numbers in here are the ones that are still could potentially be in flux if the auditors needed to make adjustments. Typically doesn't happen, but we'll see where we end up. So just some summary information. We usually start out with looking at the national and local economic data for you. The national unemployment, as you'll remember with third quarter, we just barely started to see a little bit of the impacts from COVID-19, but the fourth quarter, of course, shows us much more. The national unemployment was 11.1% at the end of June, and compare that back to the third quarter was at 4.4%. And then we did see some negative inflation out there at the national level for 3 months. That was March through May. That did turn around in June. CPI grew by 0.6%, but because of those negative months and the fairly modest growth the rest of the year ended the CPIU at only 0.64% growth. And again, that's nationally. So maybe a few of the local economic indicators I would highlight for you. Again, the unemployment in Lane County, our unemployment on for June 2020 was at 11.6%, and we had been at 4.2% the prior June. Just a note that March of 2020 had marked the 43rd month in a row where unemployment had been under 5% for Lane County, but of course that ended with the pandemic. We did see, though, in June, Lane County had gained back almost half of the jobs that had been lost in March and April. So that also shows you that unemployment number that sounds so bad at 11% actually had been worse as the fourth quarter had occurred. You'll see we do have some data on the U6 unemployment rate, but it is older data. It wasn't out there yet for 2020, but we just wanted to include that for you because that is something you've been interested in the past. We started last year including a household income report, and we found that same data. It is delayed, so we're looking back at 2018, but I wanted to highlight this for you because it shows each of the counties. And while I didn't highlight the highlights that are on here are actually out of the report itself, but if we were to look at just our 5 comparable counties, which the board will remember are Washington, Clackamas, Deschutes, Marion, and I always forget one, Jackson, sorry. So if you look at those though, Lane County is actually the lowest income of our comparable counties. So what we don't have here that we're going to hope to work on for the future is to provide you some cost of living increase, because of course when you're looking at Portland counties, we would expect their incomes to be higher because of that cost of living difference. So we hope to come back to you with that in the future. Real estate statistics, we did see a decrease in listings of homes in June 2020 compared to 2019. However, we still are seeing price increases. So the average sale price grew 8.7% over the year, and the median grew 10% over the year. So both of those numbers now, the median is at $320,000. We also have building permit data for you from land management. You'll see that the third quarter highlighted there in yellow for you does show that there was a marked downturn, as we probably expected for COVID-19 impacts. We saw commercial permits down 61% from the prior year, and residential down to 52%. So that's on the economic data. And then you should see an all funds report where we show you budget to actual comparisons. And just a few things I'll highlight for you there. We do see taxes and assessments down. You'll see it's at 99.5% of budget, still very close to 100% of budget, but that is being caused primarily by transient room tax being low in those last 3 months. We were just barely off our property tax number, so that could have been some of those third quarter payments being a little slower to come in. The federal revenue is the one that really stands out at being only 70% of budget. A big piece of that is the Medicaid wrap that happens in Health and Human Services, about 11.7 million. That is mainly a timing issue. I think some of that is going to be shown to be COVID impacts. We don't have a grasp on that yet. But we also have timing issues sometimes with our federal money. If it comes in after a date, then we're going to have to post it into the next year. So we'll have a better idea of that as we finish the audit and get some final numbers. So in the end, the resources of the county did come in at 99.12% of budget. So even though we had made some adjustments in our supplemental 4 because of impacts we knew would happen with COVID, so our budget number had come down a little bit, that is still what I would say positive news that we ended our budget at that point. On the expenditure side, total expenditures were at about 86% of budget through June. You'll see that we still show in salaries and wages and benefits, those being below the 100% mark, which is good. It means that our vacancy variance is not too drastic. We do at least a 3% vacancy variance. Some funds choose to do more, but there's still, just depends on timing of hiring positions. So we're still okay there with our budgeting. And material and services, items can be delayed over the year period, so that was at 84%. So some of those sometimes move into the next year. And then you do see 2 reports there on just specifically your general fund. And it is still positive and within budget for both quarters. We did make a couple adjustments in the general fund in the areas of car rental tax and liquor tax due to what we expected to see COVID-19 impacts. But as a whole, the budget still trended as we would expect it to on both the revenue and expense side for the end of the year. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Any questions for Ms. Moody? Commissioner Burney.
You mentioned negative inflation. I've never heard that term. Is that the same as deflation?
Well, this is where I'm not an economist, so I hate to get into those terms. But if you see yeah, it was just.
It means it goes down. Yeah.
Correct. So the cost of limit, the cost of those goods and services was negative in growth. Yeah, negative growth for 3 months.
Gotcha. And I would like to make just one quick comment, if I may, and that is, you recall not long ago we had a joint meeting with the Eugene City Council about the urban growth boundary, and a statement was made that said climate refugees are not a thing. And some of us said they are a thing. In addition to climate refugees, I just want to point out, for as high as our housing prices are, our housing prices compared to any county in the Bay Area, our household income is about half of what a Bay Area household income is, and our housing prices are about a third. So there is also a phenomenon called people moving here for a better quality of life at a lower cost. I just wanted to point that out based on your statistics, because all of it suggests we need more housing on all levels, especially affordable.
Any other questions or comments for Ms. Moody? Commissioner Farr?
I disagree with you, Joe. Just kidding. No, well stated. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you, Ms. Moody. We'll move on to item 11B, which is Order 20-09-29-06, the matter of authorizing up to $2.225 million in coronavirus relief funds through the CARES Act to respond to the effects of COVID-19, and for authorizing the county administrator to contract for goods and services for the expenditure of funds. And with us is Judy Williams, our strategy and integration manager, and Alex Kyler, our intergovernmental relations manager. Take it away, Ms. Williams.
Perfect. Thank you. And you can hear me okay? All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Buck and commissioners. And I'm just going to do a very quick overview of the item and what it means. And then I will turn it over to Alex, our intergovernmental relations manager, to walk through some of those projects that we're looking at. So as a reminder, this board order that's attached here is really doing the two things. And so it's authorizing the county administrator to expend county funds for a total of up to $2.225 million in response to the COVID emergency. It's also granting the county administrator the authority to take further actions in order to move projects forward at a rapid pace in correlation with our policies, but to move quickly and efficiently through the next steps in order to get goods and services out to our community. So these funds are part of what was $16 million that Lane County was allocated by the state due to advocacy that you all helped with and participated in. So each local government in Oregon was given coronavirus relief funds, also known as CRF funds, to established by the CARES Act. And so with these funds, our folks here have been meeting for several months. Our CRF, Coronavirus Relief Funds planning team, has been meeting for a couple months to really monitor the spending that's been happening, to review the needs of the community based on COVID emergencies, to really look through the criteria of the CRF funds. And with that, we've proposed, or the group gathered information, proposed projects, and further reviewed those projects to approve those moving forward. And so I'm going to turn it over to Alex to walk through some of those projects, and then we'll leave enough time for questions if there are any. Go ahead, Alex.
Thanks, Judy. Just sound check here. You guys can hear me okay? Good. Okay, so in your board packet, there are, as Judy described, there are 6 projects that we're recommending that the board approved spending on. The total dollar amount that these projects recommend is $2.25 million. The funding does need to be expended by the 30th of December for the CARES Act, and it must have a demonstrated COVID impact that it's trying to mitigate. The first, and I've characterized all these as grants. They probably will go out in a variety of ways, as Judy indicated, either through contracting or grants. Grants tend to be a pretty easy way for us to go, and it's been a practice that the board has deployed in some other funding strategies. But the first project that we've queued up here is a business assistance grant. If you recall, way back in March, the county teamed with the cities of Eugene and Springfield and put out some money in a very similar way to this, where we're trying to have get money to the business community as quickly as possible and with few strings as possible. That's not to say that anybody will qualify. We do have criteria to show that the business is a going concern and that it is viable. And Austin Ramirez is managing that program, and he's actually secured some other funding some other funding commitments from some of the smaller cities' coronavirus relief funds to match these dollars. So Austin is using this to leverage some other funding. We've got 1.25 million for non-congregate shelter purposes. This will join with some of the other funding that we've received for wintertime shelter strategies and other options that we're looking at for either homeless folks or eventually being able to build supportive housing programming in the Eugene Springfield area. So this is just adding to some other resources that we have. The Child Care Assistance Grant is designed to reach home-based child care providers. These folks are people who are operating under the emergency order of the governor. They do have to jump through additional hoops in order to provide services, and we're really hoping that these dollars help them meet those commitments. These dollars will be sub-allocated by Lane Community College's Quality Care Connection, which is one of 13 statewide child care resource and referral agencies. And so pretty confident that this money will really do some good in the child care community. Workforce Development Grant is some money that will be managed out of the Human Services Division to support one full-time equivalent person who will be out in rural communities doing workforce collaboration, as well as providing some additional services for workforce within HSD that is needing some equipment to help with their own remote employment. The Foreclosure Prevention Grant will be managed by Sarai Johnson, and this is to respond to threats from folks who are dealing with when the sunset on foreclosures is lifted. And we'll probably go out to some of the community financial organizations that have been working with us closely on this kind of issue. And then finally, the Lane County Technology Assistance Grant, which I do admit in the memo, I think I characterize as the only one that would really be internally focused only. And I learned yesterday that's not completely true. While this funding will be used by our own technology services to enhance our employees' ability to work from remote locations, they're also exploring ways. What they're finding is where we provide services to Lane County residents over the internet, often there are problems existing on the client's end of things in terms of access or equipment. And so there will be some limited amount of these dollars that likely go out to like a Geek Squad or even maybe the purchase of some equipment for folks who are really trying to interact with our services from their own remote locations. So again, I think a pretty good investment on the board's part, and we urge approval of this. I will say, and as many of you know, we wish that this were a lot more money. The whole coronavirus relief fund, in spite of just an enormous amount of advocacy, just didn't go the way we had really hoped. But we're proud to be able to make this kind of investment into the community. Again, I wish it were more. So I think I'll close there.
Any questions?
Chair, I just wanted to say that I was off because of technical problems, but I got back on at the beginning of this presentation.
Very good. Any further questions on this? I'll just add that I've been and I'll get to you next. I've been part of the discussions all along with staff on what they could propose potentially. We at first were not even sure we even be able to have any money to propose anything additionally. We thought it would all be eaten up by our staff response to COVID through the public health department. But it looks like we might have some additional room for these services for the community. So I'm pleased to see that. They did do extensive combing through different options for us. And they tried to do a nice array here of varying options for relief. Commissioner Bozievich.
Thank you. And I guess I kind of have two questions. First, this particular 2.25 or 225 million, Lane County is going to have to put the money out ourselves first and then get reimbursed from the state. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah.
Chair Buck and Commissioner Bozievich, that is an accurate statement. The entirety of the 16 million that Judy mentioned functions that way, where we request and are reimbursed. It's a very quick turnaround. We're finding that really a matter of days between when we submit for reimbursement and when we receive it. So it's been functioning at least operationally pretty well for us.
Good. So from my accounting, if we get this approved, we'll be up above 12 million, but we have 16 million that's been allocated to us. Is the other 4 million difference, is that just we haven't identified a need yet, or we just haven't identified the ability of doing the upfront transitional funding while we wait for reimbursement? It seems like we've got almost an unlimited need for rental assistance and mortgage assistance that's being pent up in the county right now. So can you talk about the rest of that difference between 12 million and 16?
Sure. Yeah. And we do have Robert here with us as well, who has been very instrumental in sort of guiding us through this. Essentially, Robert's been tracking, if you will, the burn rate of these funds. And so the idea here was that he felt comfortable saying, with this effort, we could afford to carve out 2.25 million. We think that the 4 million will get us through to December 30th. So we've got a couple more months of COVID response that can be used, that we can be reimbursed for through this fund. And so that's what the 4 million is for, is to get us with our normal operations through to December 30th. And Robert might be able to add some more to that if I haven't described it adequately.
Commissioner Bozievich, that is, Alex was correct. We project to spend about $1 million for the 4 remaining months of the year through December 30th. So that's our current burn rate. Add that to the 10 million we've already requested reimbursement for, plus this 2 million gets us to that $16 million.
Excellent. So is 16 million our absolute cap, or can we ask the state to do above that? Because my understanding was they were saying to us, the state folks, to the counties, you guys can't spend it fast enough and you're not spending the full amount. So is there any ability to ask for more than the 16 million?
I'll answer first, and Alex, if you want to jump in from the political side, I'll let you know first, Commissioner Bozievich, that our contract, we actually have a contract with the state right now, is at $16 million. So that's all we're currently authorized to spend. Now, as you mentioned, I referred to that the state has, if there are excess funds left over, then they can reallocate that out to other counties. But we haven't received any authorization on our end for that spending yet. And I'll defer to Alex for referring to on the political side of that.
Yeah, and Buck and Commissioner Bozievich. So there's two things that I think I would say. First is that you saw that the United States House is in the process of readopting a new version of their HEROES Act. If that passes intact, it does have language that it would extend the use of Coronavirus Relief Fund through the next federal fiscal year. So that would give us all some breathing room. If not, as Robert indicated, we think that there may be local governments and state agencies that do not fully expend these dollars by the 30th of December. I think we need a strategy for how to address that, and I'm going to be working with our staff to sort of figure, and our community partners, certainly within Eugene and Springfield, to sort of suggest what could we do if it gets down to, say, a window of only 4 or 5 weeks where there may be some funds left. We need to position ourselves to be ready to propose that we've got something in the bag. And so we'll be working with that intention, and whether we need to bring that back to the board or not clear to me yet, but certainly we're going to start to talk about that as staff.
Well, it does seem like rental assistance is something that we could spend that money fairly quickly on, as we were oversubscribed for like $1 million in 24 hours the last time we opened up rental assistance availability. So just something to keep in mind as a very quick and easy way for us to disperse funds, and a very needed reason for dispersing funds is to try and prevent that wave of evictions that may come once the eviction moratorium is lifted by the governor. So it's kind of where I would go. Thank you.
Commissioner Burney.
2 things. First, I'm delighted to hear you planning for that, Alex. I think that it makes a lot of sense. I also agree with Commissioner Bozovich that housing assistance is a great place to put it. I also think we had an interesting public input from a gentleman named Chris Lavoie this morning. And I think he suggested, and I've subsequently received an email from him, that he would also like to participate in helping form a portion of that as it relates to rebuilding the communities we lost in the wildfire, which I think also maybe we can do. That's my 2 cents on that one. I would like to also, and forgive me, but I hear the term burn rate, and I don't know if you all know what burn rate is. A burn rate is a new company that's going through venture capital, and it's spending that money on overhead before it achieves profitability. It feels to me like when staff discuss burn rate, they're just talking about free money from another source that kicks the can down the road before we end up in the hole. So I forgive my concern with that term, but that's my problem with it. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner Farr.
Thank you. 2 things to Commissioner Bozovich's comments regarding being shovel ready, so to speak. We have projects in place that can easily be demonstrated that they're ready to spend any money that's left over. We don't have to fudge around on that. So Alex, I trust your capable hands of guiding that. And Joe, in a rifle company, burn rate means something very, very different.
All right.
I think we're talking money here, though.
Well, is there a motion to approve Order 20-09-29-06 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Burney, second by Commissioner Bozovich. Any discussion? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item C, which is a discussion regarding community benefits bidding processes for capital projects. And I see we will have Clay Stillwell, our procurement manager, and Sean Waite, facilities and capital planning manager. Feel free to start when you're ready.
Hello, yes, Clay Stillwell, procurement manager. We'll get this started with some background because I recognize not everybody is immersed in procurement and contracting, and it gets a little weedy. Hopefully I won't get too into the weeds for you today, but give enough to prompt discussion. So a little bit of terminology. A community benefits agreement is typically an agreement, a contract that exists between an owner agency and contractors with the express goal of local impact or community benefits coming through the performance of that contract. These benefits typically include things like environmental or climate impact goals, social equity goals, pay and labor force goals, and it can include geographic preference for workers or suppliers, so local suppliers. What we're proposing today in this board item for discussion is actually a community benefits bidding program. And this differs from a community benefits agreement because there's not a contract. And the reason for this is restrictions in Oregon statute that make it difficult to not award capital project contracts on anything other than low bid. There are alternatives. They're called alternative contracting methods, but these are not the right tools for a lot of the projects that Lane County invests in. So in order to preserve the low bid award procedure, but still be able to identify those local impact goals and have those be contracted to specific projects, staff have come up with this community benefits bidding program. One key element to this is pre-qualification of either prime or prime and subcontractors. And what this would look like is we would have an application that these contractors would apply to. It would include requirements demonstrating that they're capable of performing the work. So are they able to meet our minimum performance requirements? But it would also include provisions that ensured they were able to meet our local impact goals to provide the community benefit through the performance of these capital project contracts. So that's the difference between community benefits bidding program and the more typical industry term of community benefits agreement. So a little bit of background of this conversation. The Lane County 2018 to 2021 strategic plan under Vibrant Communities outlines a key activity area, and this is specifically a community benefits agreement for the Lane County Courthouse, which was to be solicited under an alternative contracting method, like I mentioned before. And then in February 2019, there was a board item for discussion also for the Courthouse Community Benefits Agreement. Since then, in recent months, county staff, including council, capital projects, Steve, and labor representatives, along with Commissioner Burney, have been discussing the details of the community benefits bidding program and what it may look like. And that has informed some of the shaping of the alternatives and options that I will discuss now. So one element of the community benefits bidding program listed in the board packet as option A is essentially a set-aside program. And this is allowed under ORS it allows us to award to specific groups of people as they're certified by, in the board packet it says COBID, that's the certification office at the state of Oregon that certifies minority business enterprises, women business enterprises, service disabled veterans, business enterprises, and emerging small businesses. And this provision in ORS allows us to, for contracts not to exceed $50,000, either solicit only from certain groups that are COVID certified or direct award. And in practice, what this looks like is we have a large project and we split off a section of perhaps what would be a larger subcontract to keep it $50,000 or less and identify what we would call historically underutilized businesses to award or solicit quotes from. This would have a limited price impact, and it would also supplement any harm to equity that would come from the rest of this process. So option B, alternative 1 and 2 may have some negative impact on who can bid on this. So this would mitigate some of the equity concerns from that limitation. Moving on to option B, alternative 1. This would be prime contractor pre-qualification only. There's a few advantages and few disadvantages to this alternative. First and foremost, it would be a slight reduction in overhead. We would only have to go through a pre-qualification process for the prime contractors, so a little bit less administrative work than alternative 2, which I'll discuss in a moment. The big disadvantage is oftentimes prime contractors are serving essentially as project management. So they don't have a lot of the staff. It's a lot of the staff or employees who are in the workforce working on our capital projects are actually employed by the subcontractors. So there's a limited capacity for us to advance the local impact goals through alternative 1, option B, alternative 1. Option B, alternative 2 is alternative 1 plus major subcontractors. So the major trades would be plumbing, electric, interiors, and maybe a couple others. This would be extra work. We would, county staff would have to pre-qualify and then track performance of the subcontractors as well as the prime contractors. Depending on how this program develops, that work may be a tiny amount extra, it may be a lot. It would also allow us a great deal more leverage in advancing those community benefits through the local impact goals, because we would have a very large percentage of the workforce and money spent on the capital project tied to contracts with those local impact goals included. One other issue with alternative 2 is it's really difficult to determine if the market is ready for pre-qualification at the subcontractor level, and we don't know how yet it would impact competition on the major trades. Option C, this is the identification of the threshold for which this program, the CBB program, would kick in. And here today we've included a $1 million threshold as significant community impact projects. This would give clear direction for us moving forward. And like I mentioned earlier, in the differentiation between community benefits agreements and community benefits bidding program, the latter allows us greater flexibility to adjust moving forward, both on those thresholds and inclusion of other items in as local impact or as elements and tools within the program itself. With that, I'll turn it over to Sean Waite, who will discuss eligible products and next steps for moving forward.
Thank you, Clay. Chair Beck, commissioners. So I wanted to address just briefly the $1 million threshold that we reference here in the packet. And based on public comment from one of the presenters earlier this morning. So we chose the $1 million threshold just as a starting point. We don't know how this process is going to go for sure. We've got kind of the concept down, but as far as the actual technical process, we still need to work through that. So if we start at this higher dollar amount, that would just give us time to refine the process. We want to apply this to our a project that's coming up for parole and probation building renovation, and then see how that goes and refine the technical process through that project, and also look at the DDS building that will be constructed out at the Armory site. And then as we refine that, look at the lower threshold. I know in public comment this morning, they mentioned about $250,000. We don't think that's unreasonable, but we don't think we're prepared at this time to identify all of our projects 250 and up as part of this program until we refine those details. So Mike, did you want to talk at all about why we decided, or the timing of the parole and probation building?
Mike Penwell, capital project supervisor here. The parole and probation project is expected to be ready to go out for bid in late November, early December, and receive bids back shortly before Christmas. So it's a good project to use as a pilot project here. Anything else on that, Sean, that you wanted me to add?
No, I don't think so. You know, we have additional conversations going on with the trade unions. We have another meeting later this week. But we really wanted to get the board's, I guess, approval to continue to move forward. This is really a discussion point at this time. We will be coming back to the board in October for final approval to move forward. But just wanted to start the discussion on how the commissioners are viewing this and moving forward.
Thank you. Any discussion by board members? Mr. Rickoff, do you want to?
Commissioners, if I may, to some extent, this could be confusing. We've provided so many different options for you to look at this point. I would want to frame this as a tremendous opportunity to, really challenge and push our role in really helping the regional, if not local market. And so there is an experimental nature here, and we're asking you, where do we start with this experiment? This is something that staff has a lot of positive thoughts about and thinks that it really will help to keep local dollars here regionally, if not locally, and create some partnerships that we haven't seen before. So we see this as an extension of the county's purse strings doing good for the county and for Oregon.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? I'm looking at you, Commissioner Burney, because you know this more, I think, than the rest of us, and may know some more detail that you might want to share.
Well, I've already learned if the chair is looking at me, I shall respond. I just want to say that this has been a year and a half in the making, because I believe staff approached this correctly, which is to take conceptually what we said as ways to focus local hires, local contractors, sourcing local materials, diversifying the workforce, all those good community thoughts, and having it go through filters with capital project staff, with procurement staff, with legal staff, and they really changed the nature of what we're looking at. So in order to not make something as clear as mud, let me just say that, and Sean, I would ask you, my understanding is that that while you want the board to say, yes, move ahead with discussions, that we're about 80–90% through figuring this out in terms of applicability for a first project, which you mentioned. And really the only question, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, the only question is, at what level of project dollar amount do you want to do the first project? And because now the building trades are used to, the world they live in is this kind of stuff kicks in at a subcontract level of $50,000. Mm-hmm. And what our staff is saying for the first one, let's be exceedingly conservative and prudent, and let's do it for a project of $1 million or more. I tend to side more with the industry and say, well, let's at least look at $500,000, but I don't really think that matters if there's a commitment after a first project is exercised from staff, and I know there is, to do this for projects, as many projects as possible. And my understanding also is that by and large, this does not, because we are subject to prevailing wages, this doesn't significantly, if at all, increase a project cost, especially if it's the larger ones, as you've indicated. So I just want to share with the board, I've been part of these discussions, And I can't believe how supportive staff has been. They've come up with every scenario. Legal staff has gone through this with a fine-tooth comb, and I am elated to be able to be part of the process of bringing this to the board so that when we spend money on building without increasing costs, more of it goes to hire local people and bring them into the apprentice programs. More of it goes to hire local subcontractors to keep the money circulating locally. More of it goes to sourcing local materials, and more of it goes to diversifying our workforce, which attends to other goals. So Sean, if I stated anything incorrectly, please let us know, but that's why I'm enthused about this.
No, Commissioner Burney, you got that exactly right. And we are, focusing on the $1 million threshold, which is actually our parole and probation renovation is going to be a lot more money than that. But yeah, we have definitely committed to look at that threshold once we get through this first round, because we don't know what this is going to bring us. And until we define what the technical process is, it could be very time consuming if we're totally certifying payroll and stuff like that. So that's why we decided on the $1 million.
And finally, Chair Buck, you'll learn not to look at me again. Finally, I have developed under these, and many of the items that Clay mentioned actually can be offloaded to some of the training organizations and contractor groups. So I think as we plow forward, it's not new to some of us, and you'll become very comfortable with it. But we're getting technical. Those are my comments. It also means more people will have more money to buy and rent more houses in Lake County. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Chair,
Thank you, Chair.
after Commissioner Farr. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
calling you after Commissioner Farr.
Thanks, Chair Buck. And toward the end of that last conversation with Commissioner Burney, you covered a little bit of my question. The parole and probation project is obviously in excess of $1 million. And you spoke of it as being a wonderful pilot project. My question then becomes, if we look at alternative B, this is a project over $1 million, so it wraps in alternatives option C just inherently. But alternative B requires a $50,000 threshold on potentially a $50,000. That was the number you threw out, Joe. A $50,000 threshold on subcontractors. So I'm thinking about. I don't know. I'm not as well versed or schooled or as experienced in this as others, in particular Commissioner Burney. But the parole and probation project, which is over $1 million, we could more or less get cut our teeth on experimenting with a $50,000 threshold on subcontractors. Am I being a little bit naive when I put that consideration forward?
Can I speak to that real quick?
Please.
Please. Somebody.
So,
thanks, Clay.
The $50,000 is actually, that's the set aside threshold. So there would not necessarily be under option B a threshold at which those subcontractors kick in. We would just
pardon my interruption, Clay. That was the number that Joe Burney threw out on subcontractors, and that's the only reason I stated it. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the where the state mandated prevailing wage rates come in, and those do include fringe health benefits as well as mandatory minimum pay.
Mm-hmm. So the parole and probation project seems like a perfect project to begin with, because it's large enough to meet the option C threshold, but it's varied enough that we could introduce some of the other concepts. Mm-hmm. And following that, we have D&D, and we have other big projects down the road for us. So, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. This is exciting that we're moving ahead with this, and the idea that we could be assisting in our own expenditure of taxpayer funds to promote our local workforce is pretty exciting. I know I'm not alone in this, of why we get phone calls saying, how come there aren't local people working on these construction projects that are going on, and usually it's because the company or agency has not used this kind of approach. So to involve our capital project staff in implementing a goal of the board to keep more of the money in our community, to make sure local people, to the extent possible, are employed in these projects. Yes, and the short answer is yes, move ahead with this. I also agree that applying it to the parole and probation construction project first would be a great opportunity. I would tend to side with a lower number, but I also like the approach of putting it together in this first big project that we're already committed to. But I don't want to, I guess I'll phrase it this way. I'd like to hear both from the unions as well as from the county staff on how it did work out for applying it to the parole and probation, and then perhaps we can get onto the topic of lowering the number. So thanks.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess a quick question first. How many other jurisdictions in Oregon have implemented this sort of community benefits bidding process?
May I, Chair?
Please.
This type of process, I can't answer the question, Jay. I can tell you that without knowing, I'm going to get in trouble for this, without knowing what they were doing, LCC bound its bond election and by instituting these community benefits. And now they've been actually taking the lead from whatever staff work county staff have done. Following this, the city of Eugene is going to have a work session on it. This has been a wonderful opportunity to pave new ground. Previously, groups were told that Oregon law precluded doing community benefit agreements, and that's why you heard Clay explain that this is not an agreement. It's really a procurement process. So I don't have the answer, but I can tell you in Lane County, none have. And I can tell you in Multnomah County, they use the same term for an entirely different process that ends up increasing project costs significantly. That's not what we're talking about here.
So some of the point of my question is, having spent a good portion of my career either bidding on public work or contracting out public work when I was at eWeb, I got pretty familiar with prevailing wage and the amount of paperwork it takes, but I also was familiar with a lot of legal actions that were going back and forth about bidding processes and contracts. And one of my concerns is, being one of the first out of the gate, we are going to be the legal testing ground for this. There were lawsuits about local preferences in the past in contracting. And so for that reason, I am going to support the idea of making the 1 million contract limit. Because if we start getting into smaller contracts, they don't have enough dollar value involved to support the legal cost if we end up in court over the bidding process. So I don't want to start testing this at 250,000 or less, or something like that. I want to, let's start with a couple of big projects and see whether or not we end up with legal challenges, and those projects are big enough maybe to absorb some of those costs. But I would not be surprised to see some of this challenged by the construction contracting side and all. Some large contractor from another state may not like the idea that we're doing some of this stuff. And those folks have attorneys. And that stuff has ended up in court before. Local preferences have actually been shot down in court. So I want to caution folks, we are early adopters, which means we will be the test case. So holding the project limit values up higher makes some sense in that, you know, we won't be fighting this over a $50,000 contract and sucking up more than the $50,000 just in attorney fees. So I am going to express my support for option C, and staying there for right now and looking at those couple large projects we have coming up and seeing how those work out, and kind of test the waters. And then as we get things more established and legal precedences are set, we can start moving the bar down. That's exactly what happened with prevailing wage. A lot of, you know, the limits for prevailing wage gradually got lower and lower. And in fact, then there got to be laws around you couldn't split projects up to avoid prevailing wage. You know, so I'll have the warning also to the folks over in procurement: be careful of projects at 900,000 right now and writing extras. If you're going to set that limit at $1 million, you better put those restrictions on smaller contracts that have the potential to go over $1 million. Because my experience at eWeb was, if you had a $45,000 project, you better put prevailing wage requirements in there, or at least the record keeping for it, because the first extra you get, you're in need of having all that record keeping. So, so just a kind of word of caution about that, and to you know, my suggestion is that 1 million makes perfect sense to me.
Mr. Rickoff?
Chair Buck, Commissioner Bozovich, thank you very much. Your caution is well noted. We did not have Jim Chaney here with us today. He's been central in helping us craft this piece, knowing that it is a bit of an experiment for us. And I will not speak for him today. This being a discussion, we can follow up with this when we do bring it back to the board for greater consideration. We do feel, we do think we are on sound legal ground with this, and certainly Jim in his work is confident that this is an innovative approach, and we are an early adopter. So I think there will be a lot of attention on this. So point well noted, and if you would like to have County Council with us when this comes back to the board, we'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. I'm also very supportive myself. I would like to eventually see the threshold go down once we get through this, but I understand, like everybody else, that this is just dipping our toe in the water a bit and seeking all the internal processes that we have to do to make it actually function for the future. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you, Chair Buck. You know, the thing that I keep thinking about is who ultimately benefits from this, and it really is the households of the people who are doing the work. And if we go back to Ms. Moody's presentation, we're looking at Lane County's median household income compared to, for instance, Clackamas County's. Lane County is $53,000, Clackamas is $81,000, and the cost of living is not vastly different. So, you know, I like to think about the households, the people involved in doing the work are the ones who are going to be the ultimate beneficiaries of this, and they spend their money locally. So I salute the work, and I look forward to the process as we move forward. And Clay and Sean, thank you very much, and for all the others who are putting work in on this.
Commissioner Burney?
Just a very personal note, I really thank not just staff, but all the commissioners for supporting this. And even Commissioner Bozovich, who supports this, not to put words in your mouth, sir, but just supports being precautionary and being prudent in moving forward on this. I want you all to know that County Council, the reason that this didn't come before us half a year ago is for that very reason. County Council and staff, Jim Chaney, really, when I said went through a fine-tooth comb, fine tooth comb, anticipating, okay, what if there's a protest? How do we structure this to mitigate that, et cetera? So I appreciate everyone's support. I honestly, in my heart, believe that this is one way to redefine economic development in our community by, as prudently as possible, as Commissioner Farr mentioned, having the beneficiaries be the local people that are doing as much of the work as possible. That's why you get all the, trained, gone through apprentice programs, all of that stuff. I would like to say that I believe I am, again, from the building trades perspective, $1 million is 50 times more than, if I'm doing my math in my head correct, more than usually what will trigger many of these benefits anyway. So I don't think $500,000 would be unreasonable, but I'm willing, and trust me, I won't hear the end of it from my friends in the trades. I'm willing to do the staff to this recommendation of $1 million as a starting project. But I would simply request that a rejoinder be that the board gets reports regularly on how it's going, whether that's quarterly or what, so that we really can move to lower that threshold as soon as possible as staff become familiar with operating these things, because all we're doing is helping our own people. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Thank you, everybody. That was a good discussion. We'll move on to county administration announcements.
All right. I know you've noticed that I am not Steve Mokrohysky. He had an obligation this afternoon, so he could not be with us. He will be back with you at 3 p.m. He left me the privilege of giving a quick update on Lane County elections. As you know, this is a unit that I oversee, and please remember that 5 out of the 6 folks who work on elections are relatively new, and I mean like within 6 months new. So it is a remarkable venture that they're undertaking. The voter registration is currently at 268,423 and is of course expected to climb. On average, the office is processing 793 registration transactions per day. That's compared to 235 in July and 565 in August. The unit has already mailed 2,060 military and overseas ballots. The deadline was September 19th, and approximately 1,600 out-of-state ballots are scheduled to be mailed on the statutory deadline of October 5th. Local ballots, of course, will be delivered to the post office for mailing on October 15th. That too is a statutory date. Please know that the elections team has been available at the McKenzie Fire Multi-Agency Resource Center, and it's been a very popular table at those events. Folks are declaring their deep commitment to be able to vote and are concerned about their ballots. Wanted to reassure folks that anyone impacted by the recent wildfires can update their voter registration to add a mailing address for us to mail their ballot. And then we're working with those impacted to ensure that they receive their ballots and to encourage anyone who has concerns to contact elections to discuss their options. There is, of course, still the tools. Voters are encouraged to check the status of their registration at Oregon Votes, that's with an S, oregonvotes.gov/myvote. There's still paper voter registration cards available at the office outside of the building, so that's actually available 24 hours a day and can be deposited 24 hours a day. I think that is it for my announcements.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bozovich.
Just a quick question, Greg. If somebody, from the Holiday Farm fire, they're out there in House 11. Mm-hmm. Now they're at a hotel in Gateway in House 12. Which ballot are they getting?
if they have changed their mailing address, it would be the mailing address for the location that they are where they currently reside. If they are leaving it the same and simply having a mail pickup service, say at Walterville, which a lot of folks are continuing with, it would represent the area in which they their house existed prior to the fire. Does that answer your question? The U.S. Postal Service is also working to get a temporary postal site up in Mackenzie Bridge, somewhere on the east side of the burn. That's still a pretty significant inconvenience for those that are on the east side of things. Getting to Walterville is pretty hard to do.
Commissioner Berney?
Greg, can you tell us and everyone when ballots will be mailed to people?
Yes, that will be, let me see, that will be Thursday, October 15th. All 268,000 ballots will be dropped off at the post office for their mailing.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to commissioner's business and commissioner announcements. Are there any announcements from anyone? Okay, I'm not hearing any. So we'll move to future board assignment requests. I know that Commissioner Bozovich had a few. Do you want to start us off?
Sure, thank you. And interesting enough, while we were meeting this afternoon, I got an email from Keir Miller. I had forwarded to him and Alex Kyler and Austin Ramirez a listing basically of concerns that I asked some land use consultants and attorneys, professionals to give me an idea of what might be stumbling blocks for folks that are rebuilding houses up there, particularly ones that existed prior to Senate Bill 100 in the Holiday Farm fire. And he basically says that the staff there's looked at it and they have additional stuff they may be adding to it, but he's scheduled already a discussion item for the board on October 27th. So it sounds like at least the planning portion of my request is already on your calendar, according to this email from Mr. Miller. So I'll skip the planning portion and suggest that there be, in addition to the planning issue that we have, if I can get 3 head nods from board members, a similar item about the actual building permit portions of reconstruction up the river, and that's our ability to waive or lower fees, which means we have to identify alternative revenue streams, and also our ability to expedite, and including inspections and other things, and on both of these issues, it's going to take on some matters board policy direction to staff. Without any sort of direction from the board, they will continue down their current road of following all the prior board policy direction and code, which includes all the major stumbling blocks people are going to run into reconstructing something that's a non-conforming use, basically. Even people constructing stuff that was built last year are going to have issues in just the building permit process. So I think if I can get 3 head nods to hold a similar work session on the building safety permit side, as well as the planning side, which apparently is already scheduled.
I have my head nod. It looks like we've got head nods.
I'd like to ask a question about this. Yeah, I would like to know whether we're going to have that review of the fire prior to this work session, so we can find out if we learned anything about whether the fire and the placement of structures in the in fire risk areas should be allowed to be rebuilt.
I'm not entirely clear what you mean by a review. Are you asking for a separate work session on a review?
No, we were told by Mr. Mokrahysky that they're going to do a review of the fire, and they're going to also do a kind of a learn more, see what they can learn about not only the fire, putting the fire out, but also what were the risks involved, you know, in the FireWise program. So whether or not the FireWise program had anything positive or negative to do with the spread of the fire and how rapidly it spread. So more about that before we launch into a work session about rebuilding everything, even things that maybe shouldn't be rebuilt.
Mr. Rickoff?
Chair Buck, Commissioner Sorensen, I was not present for this morning's conversation. It was my understanding that Dan Hurley and Steve Mokrahysky spoke to after-action reviews and assessments work that was going to be happening with the EOC. I don't know if I understood that to be an actual board assignment. I could be completely wrong.
I don't think that was a board assignment. I think that was just something internally people are working on, and we're going to have probably numerous after action reports of the Holiday Farm fire, and it's a little soon, I think, to have some debrief. I mean, we're still in the middle of transferring to recovery, but when it comes to permitting and rebuilding, I do tend to try to make sure people are aware that this is a process and could take some time, including a lot of discussion by the board and planning staff. So I wouldn't expect that this is going to happen next week. We are going to get it on the calendar so we can move things forward. I'm also very concerned that I'm not necessarily willing to put people in harm's way again a second time and go through something as devastating like this. But also very concerned about ensuring that people have the opportunity to get back into their own community. Commissioner Farr?
Thank you. While we're talking about building codes and how do we rebuild the houses, the homes, the households, the places that people live that have been destroyed, an important element of this is how do we rebuild in a way that where there's a net increase in residences in the burned area. And I think if we do this judiciously, we can actually, a few years down the road, have more homes in the area and still meet Oregon's requirements than we had before the fire. So that's what I would hope a part of the discussion is, not toward a net reduction in houses, not toward a net reduction in homes, but toward a net increase in homes. And that's an important part of the discussion.
All right, let's double back. Commissioner Bozovich.
So just to be clear, I think we got the three head nods to add another work session purely on the building permit side of things, as we already have apparently one on the planning side for October 27th. And I don't know if we need after action reports on individual structure assessments at that time to start talking about things like legal lot verifications and where should we start looking for replacing, or do we agree with the concept of reducing building permit fees for fire victims? And if so, where should we start looking for revenue? That has nothing to do with whether or not one structure survived versus another. Those are policy questions just for us to start grappling with. The final work session I was going to ask for is somehow or another either to ask somebody from eWeb to participate or even to be a joint work session with the eWeb board to talk about the ability to assist homeowners in putting in advanced septic systems, and also to look at the ability to help Blue River with a community sanitary sewer system. Those are items I think, again, aren't so much dependent on which houses get placed as just the whole concept of how can we help people do a better job of protecting our watershed, and our ability to try and help with that. We got involved in helping other jurisdictions with various, whether it was the Rao Water District and trying to get their system set up when they got separated from Cottage Grove, to the Dexter Sanitary District and helping them with their technical problems and getting them back in compliance. I think it's something that we've been involved with before, is some of these rural unincorporated areas that need help. I think we're currently trying to assist the Mapleton Water District in getting grants to replace their filtration system. So I don't see that as a disconnect or something that we can't look at more quickly. But so if I had 3 head nods, maybe we can talk to the folks at eWeb about what our staff can talk to them about what might be appropriate, and start that ball rolling. I know it seems like we're rushing into some of this stuff, but if we don't start now with planning to do these work sessions and getting these policy directions to staff, a year will go by really fast.
I would ask if we could amend that just a little bit, because eWeb, Lane Electric is the majority of the utility up there. And if we could expand it to not only eWeb, but let's expand it to any entity that could help perhaps put in a sanitary system up there. That could be FEMA, maybe, working with congressional staff on that. So it's not solely focused on eWeb, because I'm concerned that they're not the provider for the majority of the affected area.
I guess maybe the reason I was focused on eWeb is their watershed protection plan for their source water, because their surface water utility covers the entire area of the fire. So
we've been in
discussions. But I don't disagree. Lane Electric, though, they're electric provider, but they're not a water provider or sanitary provider. But Mackenzie River Trust, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, whoever we can bring in to assist with this, I think is a good idea.
Yeah, you got a head nod for me if we could expand that, just because I'm not sure eWeb is totally going to be able to help or not. We've been in discussions with them over the last year and a half regarding the sanitary system up there, and options are limited, but there might be other resources.
I'm good with that.
Okay. There's only 3 people on the screen now. I don't know where Commissioner Burney, but I think we got 3 amongst us at the very least. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this too. It's really crucial, at least from my limited vantage point, that we really involve the eWeb's water quality people, because of the real threat to the drinking water. But I also agree with you, Commissioner Buck, that including Lane Electric would be good because of the utility component of the people at electric utility, of the people that obtain their electrical service up there. Thank you.
Okay. So just a reminder, we had 19 items on our board assignments before this. So this makes it 21, but we know that this is pretty critical. Any other future board assignment requests to talk about?
I have 4. No.
They may be done in 4 years from now. Okay, we'll go to review assignments.
I'm here by phone. I've missed the last few minutes.
We'll catch you up. We're just added 2 work sessions, both regarding the Holiday Farm fire and building, from what Commissioner Bozovich mentioned earlier this morning. And we'll have Mr. Rickoff summarize those for us.
Yes, we will. Chair Buck, Commissioners, we have 2 assignments.
Is there anything I need to do other than try to get onto the
No, just we're wrapping up here, so you can just hang on and listen.
Yep. Okay, so because we have already scheduled a work session on the planning and policies for the rebuilding of Blue River scheduled for October 27th, and that's already done, we have 2 new assignments. One is a work session on building permits and safety issues related to the Holiday Farm fire. And then the second is a joint meeting with EWEB and other pertinent partners to discuss watershed protection, including a conversation on the sanitation systems and opportunities to improve and protect over the long term the watershed. Those are the 2 assignments.
That sounds accurate to me. Anybody else?
Commissioner Bosovic, did I get it more or less? Thank you.
Very good. Okay, well, with that, we have an executive session at 3 o'clock. So I will read us into that, and then we'll have a short break, and then we can all get back together at 3 o'clock. And just a reminder, that's a different login for that meeting. So for the executive session today, Tuesday, September 29th, 2020, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection and to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to litigation or litigation likely to be filed. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-660, subsection 2, subsection F, and which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. I don't necessarily see that need at the moment, but we will reserve that right. Okay. Very good. We will be in recess for a few minutes until 3 o'clock. Thank you.